So shipping it, yeah, through the mail. And that just arrived today. He is a Thunderstruck son, and Thunderstruck is kind of the deer that fired off this fallow deer, you know, big fallow deer industry.
It's essentially preventative.
All right, check this out. I don't know if you can see it, but it's actually like legitimately raining. And like what rain has meant for the last 6 months is that we got half an inch, you know, and after a while it just didn't do anything. It's like actually raining. There's those shiny spots on the ground. It's actually standing water. I don't know what to do with myself. It's just been nuts. In the last 24-ish hours, we've gotten 3.5 inches of rain, which is just awesome. I went back on our weather station and looked, and in the last 60 days, you hear the rain on the tin roof. In the last 60 days, we had less than half an inch. So 2 months less than half an inch of rain. You know, it's almost too late for stuff to grow this year, but you gotta start somewhere. So we're thankful for it. But anyway, I'm out here in the barn again. Welcome back. So you saw a video where we were putting cedars in the deer. We're preparing these things to AI breed them for the first time. One of the pieces of the complicated puzzle is getting, and if you don't want your kids to have to have a talk with you, you might skip this part, but getting the buck semen first under our ownership or possession, and then actually physically getting it to the farm. So the way that most people do it, in the cattle world, we just had our own tank and it got maintained throughout the year, and so we kept everything on the farm there. But partially because of the value of the deer semen right now, actually that's pretty much the biggest driver. It's not worth the risk of my own personal tank, so most people, including myself, store it at a central facility. So it's a third party that all they do is maintain the tanks and transfer ownership of straws of semen back and forth, and then ultimately ship to the producer when they're ready for it. So shipping it, yeah, through the mail. And that just arrived today. So the white tank is mine. I've gotten it filled. I got it filled the other day. So it's ready to go, and it'll last, I think they say 20 weeks. Anyway, I think they say 20 weeks. I only need it to last another week and a half. The blue is what they call a shipper. So that's what comes in the mail. And inside the blue tank is another tank full of liquid nitrogen and the stuff we're going to use. So step one is get it. We've gotten it. Step two is transfer it to our tank, and then the shipper tank will go back to Champion Genetics, which is in Texas, and that's where our account is, where we store all of our product. So I'm going to go ahead and transfer it over, and we'll kind of talk about the bucks that we're going to use this year. Alright, so we're going to transfer straws from the shipper unit to my tank. So, I'm going to start moving stuff over. That was a pain. You almost need 3 or 4 hands to do it. But be as quick as possible moving this stuff over. Situation here, I'm trying to move it from liquid to liquid as quickly as possible without that temperature of the straw itself coming up. So that first buck was a buck called Impressive. He's a Sola Fe buck that he's out of, he's out of a buck called Mighty Moose, who is a big, very well-known producer, a good producer of big offspring. And Impressive himself, he's got really wide palms and just a pretty cool buck. So Sola Fe buck. He's got the white gene. So certain registries can identify the color. I don't remember the terminology, but the character in the DNA profile that determines the color of the animal. Or if it's a recessive color, it may not be the color of the animal, but a trait that they carry for a specific color. So we've only got one white doe, and so I wanted to use a buck that has a white gene just to try to increase our odds of getting another white one. So I'm going to use Impressive, who is not a white buck, but he carries that white gene on our white doe, and then we're also going to use that buck on our doe Amelia, who is an extra daughter. She's out of a buck named Extra. She's the one we picked up from Texas. So he grows big deer, he's got a good pedigree, so it would be a good fit for both of those animals. Well, that's the first one. All right, let's see what the next one is. Okay. It's kind of a pain because I only got one or two straws of each buck. And so, you know, these canes are designed to hold 10 straws. They hold 5 in a lower level and 5 in an upper level. So you could potentially have all 10 slots filled. And you would have 10 straws in one cane. In our case, there's 1 or 2 straws. So it's a lot of pulling and moving when, if you just had 10 of one buck, you would just move it once. But I'm trying to increase the diversity from the standpoint of, if I use all of one buck and, you know, he doesn't produce or he doesn't mix well, doesn't cross well with the genetics my deer has that they've got, if I try 5 or 6 different bucks, well, then the next year I could use all one and I'll get, you know, still a great variety of genetics because I've started out with a bunch of different ones. It's more complicated, it's kind of a pain, but it's what we're doing. So, so the buck I just moved is a buck called Tombstone. He's owned by Damwild, and I think they may have partners on some of these bucks, so I just know the primary owner. He is a Thunderstruck son, and Thunderstruck is kind of the deer that fired off this fallow deer, you know, big fallow deer industry. There's so many big deer that have Thunderstruck in their pedigree. So Tombstone, he's about this wide of a deer, super wide deer. But yeah, he's just a Thunderstruck, and I don't remember what he has on the bottom, but maybe nothing. But he should throw some cool offspring. Very cold. All right, so that deer was a buck called OG, or Original Gangster. He's also a Damwild buck, and he's just a baseline buck that they've had out of their genetics. He may have one line of pedigree, but none of the big name bucks behind him. But Damwilds, they've got some great big fallow deer, and just because a deer doesn't have a pedigree doesn't mean they can't be big deer, and vice versa. Just because a deer does have a pedigree doesn't mean they're going to be big deer. So he's a buck that's really blown up over the last year or two. Big, wide chocolate buck. So a lot of people have noticed him, and I'm hoping that he produces good up here. That's OG. Okay, that buck was a buck called Maverick. He also came from Sola Fe, but he's owned by Damwild again. I used 3 of their bucks this year because they're kind of like me. They've got bigger deer than me, but they've got a wide spread of genetics. One is a baseline, OG's a baseline deer. He's just a big, giant, white chocolate buck. Hopefully the rain doesn't get too loud here. Not that I might complain. Tombstone's a thunderstruck son, so I'm getting thunderstruck up here. And then this buck's Maverick, and he is also thunderstruck over a Sola Fe buck called Tree. And Tree's produced some pretty good deer, so getting a little more thunderstruck with a mix of Tree from another Sola Fe buck. Alright, that buck, I've got high hopes for it. I had high hopes for all of them, but this one's kind of cool. He's a buck called Hammer Time, and Hammer Time came out of a deer called Sledgehammer. But what Hammer Time has going is he also came from Sola Fe Ranch, from their farm, but I believe he's owned by Bigtime whitetails. So Hammer Time has Sledgehammer as his sire, and Sledgehammer's mother is a doe called Lady. Now Lady's owned by Sola Fe. That's a doe that has produced some just incredible deer. They like to call her a super doe. What's unique about Hammer Time is he is actually out of Lady. So there's a little bit of, they're going to call it line breeding because hopefully it works. It's crossbreeding if it doesn't work. So he's out of Lady and out of a buck who's also out of Lady. So you got doubled up on this super doe that's just produced some amazing animals. So should be a big deer. He's still a fairly young deer. Hammer Time is, but I think there's a lot of potential there. All right, last one. That buck was a buck called All In. He is also from Sola Fe Ranch originally. They like to say that's where the big bucks come from, and it's really proven to be true. They've been into this game for a long time with great records and building great genetics long before pedigrees and registries were a big deal. Anyway, SFR All In, or Sola Fe Ranch All In, he's another unique buck. He's not the biggest buck in the world. Now we bought that from ETO Genetics, and the buck's owned by Bigtime Whitetails and ETO Genetics, but that straw came from ETO. So he's a buck that's got a really cool pedigree. He's got Lady in his background. He's got RC Red 3, I believe, who's the mother of Big Money and Lightning as well. He's got Royal, I believe, in his pedigree. There's a buck from Sola Fe that's produced a bunch of big deer. He just has he's got a lot of good producers in his pedigree that, again, he's not the biggest deer in the world, but if you line up enough of that pedigree, you just hope that the cross you make is the one that makes the big deer. Same way with as we raise cattle, we use good bulls on good cows, and you get a mediocre calf. And for some reason, you pick one bull he's just like the others. He's just a little different genetically, and you get a calf that's 50 pounds heavier than its peers. So you just never know, crossing, vastly different genetics, what's gonna produce and what's just gonna be mediocre. So again, that's part of why we're using so many different bucks on a fairly small group of does for starting herd. So we'll see, but it's all transferred. It's going to stay there for another week, and we'll put it to work, and hopefully we'll get a bunch of great fawns next year.